elders in every town as I directed you. What Paul charges Titus with gives us some really good insights in how to use our words correctly in this manner. As Titus is going to be setting up leadership, working within these communities, working in these towns, engaging the culture and the people, what Paul says to him is going to give us a lot to consider as we think about how we use our words to confront, to warn, and to challenge. Titus is to get these churches in order and appoint leadership. And so after explaining what the church leaders Titus is supposed to appoint look like, that there be people of integrity and an understanding of the faith, Paul's going to say this in verse 10. I'm going to read the larger paragraph that we're going to look at this morning. It says, "For there are many rebellious people, full of meaningless talk and deception, especially those of the circumcision group. They must be silenced, because they are disrupting whole households by teaching things they ought not to teach, and that for the sake of dishonest gain. One of the Crete's own prophets had said, 'Cretians are always liars, evil brutes, lazy gluttons.' This saying is true. Therefore rebuke them sharply, so that they will be sound in the faith and will pay no attention to Jewish myths or to the merely human commands of those who reject the truth. To the pure, all things are pure, but to those who are corrupted and do not believe, nothing is pure. In fact, both their minds and consciences are corrupted. They claim to know God, and by their actions they deny him. They are detestable, disobedient, and unfit for doing anything good." Now, this is a strong-worded paragraph within this letter. And right smack in the middle of it, Paul says this: rebuke them sharply. Rebuke them sharply. Rebuke is a really strong word. We don't typically use that word in day-to-day conversation. Hey, I rebuke you, and you don't talk like that. And if you do, it's not helping you at all. We don't use that word typically when we're engaging people. But what does it mean? Well, the idea, the definition here, the thought of passenger seat on a road trip. You check, you're not the one driving, you're on this really long trip, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's family. Sorry for the bad age jokes. You're in the passenger seat and you're looking at the directions, you're looking at where we're supposed to be heading, and you realize that the wrong direction, we need to be moving in this direction. This isn't the way we're supposed to go. We need to be going this way. This isn't the path we should be on. We need to make a course correction and get on the right path. That's in essence what rebuke means. To rebuke is to help someone make a course correction. We're helping somebody make a course correction. If you're shouting at the movie character to stop going in that wrong direction, then we need to help them see the right direction. In the same way that when we're moving in the wrong direction, we need people to help us make a course correction. And so what and the how? First off, why? Why would we want to help somebody course correct? Why would we want to use our words in this way? Why would we even want to go there? Well, Paul actually alludes to it at the start of the letter. He says in verse 1, identifying himself, he says, "Paul, a servant of God and an apostle of Jesus Christ, to further the faith of God's chosen ones and their knowledge of the truth that leads to godliness." Paul says that they are. Paul had a goal to help people grow in Jesus, experience life with Jesus, be faithful in their faith in Jesus. And so he was purposeful in what he did to move people toward that goal. And that answers the why question. Why would we want to help somebody course correct? We course correct because we need to be moving toward Jesus. Am I moving toward him? Are those who I'm connected with, is the church moving toward him? Remember, we rebuke, we help course correct, not merely to tell someone they're wrong, but for the purpose of making a change. Well, what is that change toward? It isn't toward me, and it's not toward you. We don't want the person to change toward themselves because that's probably what got them in this first place. We want to move toward Jesus. If all we do is tell someone that they're caring about who they are. James said in the end of his letter in chapter 5, he says, "My brothers and sisters, if one of you should wander from the truth and someone should bring that person back, remember this: whoever turns a sinner from the error of their way will save them from death and cover a multitude of sins." We need to bring people back from the wrong direction that they're going and move them toward Jesus. And all of us following Jesus, we get off kilter sometimes. We start moving in a wrong direction, a different direction. Even for the right reasons, we're still not moving toward him. And we need people to get us back, focusing and following him. And so when I think about how to use my words in this way, this immediate, why would I do this, helps me to evaluate my motives of why am I saying what I'm going to say to somebody? Why am I doing this? Is it to point them toward Jesus? Or is it for something else? Am I pointing this person to Jesus, or is my goal to express control over them? I want them to know who I am and what I think, and that they need to get in line with that. That's not what our goal is as followers of Jesus. Am I pointing people to Jesus, or is my goal to shame them? I want them to know that they're wrong. Well, what does that help? How is that helping the situation? Again, if all we can do is point out wrong, but not help people see the right direction. Am I pointing to Jesus, or is my goal for personal gain? I'm saying this to make me more comfortable, me feel safer. The person that, not the why, but the what. What would you want to course correct somebody regarding? What godliness? Another translation puts it this way: to teach them to know the truth that shows them how to live godly lives. Knowing truth and living godly is what moving toward him looks like. That is how we are to be defined. If I'm moving toward him, then this is what my life is going to look like. This is what I need to course correct toward. With Titus in regard to the people that he's dealing with. He says in verse 10 again, "For there are many rebellious people full of meaningless talk and deception, especially those of the circumcision group." We need to what do we get from there is we need to course correct distortions of the gospel. These people are rebellious of God's standards and are teaching things contrary to what's true about Jesus. That a relationship with God isn't just based on Jesus alone, but based on us doing certain things and being a certain type of way. No, that's wrong, Paul says. And we need to course holds by teaching things they ought not to teach. We have to course correct divisiveness that threatens community. Falsehoods that are pulling people apart. We can't allow that. We have to speak to things that will disrupt the community of faith, so that they will be sound in the faith, verse 13 and 14, and will pay no attention to Jewish myths or to the merely human commands of those who reject the truth. We have to course correct foolish thoughts not based in truth. They are rejecting what's true. And do you hear what he's saying there? They're holding on to just clever tales of concocted theories, just what somebody thinks, not what is true. And we have to course correct against those things. We have to call out foolish thoughts, not based in truth. Paul speaks about course correcting these falsehoods, but if we're supposed to know truth, we're also supposed to live godly lives. And Paul says we have to course correct ungodliness. And again, he doesn't mince words. He calls out people for claiming to know God, but then denying him with their lifestyles. And what denials, what things do they need to course correct? We need to course correct a selfish lifestyle. He says in verse 12, one of Crete's own prophets has said, Cretans are always liars, evil brutes, and lazy gluttons. Now, that's not to say that every single person on the island is like that, but this is one of their own people saying, yeah, this is just kind of what we're known for. And there's a selfishness there, and Paul said, this is not good. We have to course correct selfish lifestyles. We have to course correct ideas that everything is okay, that anything is right. He says, to the pure, all things are pure, but to those who are corrupted and do not believe, nothing is pure. There isn't any sense of this is right, this is holy. It's just, well, whatever. And we can't allow that type of a thinking. We have to course correct corrupted thinking and corrupted consciousness. He says, in fact, both their minds and their consciences are corrupted. How they think. And the idea of having those inner promptings of, you know what, I probably shouldn't do this, that in them is corrupted. And when we see that kind of lifestyle, we have to call that out and course correct. And then we have to course correct detestable, disobedient lifestyles. They claim to know God, but by their actions they deny him. They are detestable, disobedient, and unfit for doing anything good. What are we supposed to call out? Distortions of the gospel, divisive, threatening community, anything divisive, threatening community, foolish thoughts not based in truth, a selfish lifestyle, the idea that everything is right, that nothing is wrong, corrupted thinking and corrupted consciousness, detestable, disobedient lifestyles. These are the things which should not be seen in the lives of people, in the lives of the people of God. These should not be associated with the people who say they love Jesus. These type of things should not be coming out of us. And so we have to ask ourselves, why do they? Why do these things describe the people of God at times? Because it's the same issues in our days, just different details than what Titus was experiencing. We are to be people of truth and godliness. Paul is telling Titus, you need to look for leaders of integrity who know the truth. Why? Because they need to be guiding people to have integrity and know the truth. To know the truth and to live godly lives. But too often, that's not what we see in the church. And we need to course correct that. We need to course correct the abominations of thinking, the ungodly lifestyles and thinking that we see in the church. When we have churches suing the government, saying that their right to gather has been taken away, but they never ask, should we meet? Then the church needs a course correction. When we have Christians talking only about how looting is wrong, but never saying anything about racism and its systemic evil reality in our country, then the church needs a course correction. When we have Christians being one of the largest groups of people to fall for conspiracy theories, justifying it with, well, it could be true, rather than rejecting things that don't have any evidence or factual backing, then the church needs a course correction. When we have Christians celebrating vulgarity in our culture as something to praise and embrace, when vulgarity becomes an anthem, then we need a course correction. When we have Christians insulting and demeaning those of an opposing political party, basing right and wrong on political ideology rather than the kingdom of God, then we need a course correction. And the course correction, it has to start with ourselves. It has to start with who we are. Jesus said, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there is a plank in your own? You hypocrite! First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Jesus is not saying that we never tell our brother, you have a speck in your eye, there's something wrong. But what he's saying is, are you living Jesus? But I have to start with who I am. I have to allow other people to speak into my life, that I would course correct and be who Jesus is. Knowing truth and living godly is what moving toward Jesus looks like. The church needs a course correction. How do we go about doing that, though? How do we speak these course corrections into one another's lives? Well, why we say something matters, what we say matters, how we say it matters. Sometimes all you have to do is tell somebody. Just say, hey, what you did offended me, or hey, I don't really know if that's the best. I don't think that's who you are. In fact, Jesus says in Matthew 18, if your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault just between the two of you. If they listen to you, you have won them over. Go and talk to them. But there's a be strong with your words. My kids know the dad voice. There's the, hey, you need to clean up your room, and there's, you need to clean up your room. Do you understand the difference in those? The second one is the stronger, sharply. And sometimes we have to talk with that. But whatever the specific context calls for, there is one thing that is always required. One thing that is never optional. One thing that we can't go, oh yeah, I forgot about that. It has to be first and foremost in how we talk to people when we course correct. Speaking in love. In another letter, talking about how God puts people within the church to grow people into spiritual maturity, Paul says, speaking the truth